The chandelier lights flickered slightly as if sensing the tension in the air. Gavin rose from his seat at the head of the long oak table, his hand firmly holding Caleb's, and declared, "Mom, Dad, this is Caleb. He's my boyfriend, and I love him." Gasps echoed around the room, his father's face turning red with rage while his mother clutched her pearls, the entire mansion seeming to hold its breath in that moment of revelation. Silverware clattered as Aunt Lydia dropped her fork, and Gavin's younger sister, Emily, stared with wide eyes that mixed shock and something almost like relief. The grand dining room in the Beverly Hills estate, with its marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manicured gardens, suddenly felt smaller, suffocating under the weight of unspoken truths that had been building for years. Caleb stood beside him, tall and steady in his simple button-down shirt that contrasted sharply with the tailored suits around the table. His calloused hands from years of manual work now intertwined with Gavin's. No one spoke for what felt like minutes, but Gavin felt every second stretch into eternity, his heart pounding against his ribs as he realized there was no turning back. This dinner was supposed to be a celebration of his father's latest business merger, the kind of event where deals were sealed over aged wine and lobster bisque. Instead, it had become the battlefield for Gavin's entire identity. He had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head during sleepless nights, but nothing prepared him for the actual silence that followed his words. His father, Richard Harrington, the self-made real estate tycoon who built an empire from nothing, finally found his voice. "What kind of joke is this, Gavin? Sit down. Now." The command cut through the air like a whip, but Gavin didn't move. He squeezed Caleb's hand tighter, drawing strength from the man who had quietly changed everything in his life. It hadn't always been like this. 6 months earlier, Gavin had been drowning in the expectations of his world, attending endless board meetings and charity galas where smiles were as fake as the promises of loyalty. He was 28, the golden son destined to take over Harrington Enterprises. Yet inside he felt hollow. One rainy afternoon in downtown Los Angeles, he had ducked into a small community art center to escape the paparazzi that sometimes trailed him. There, among easels and scattered paintbrushes, he met Caleb. The 26-year-old was leading a free workshop for underprivileged kids, his laughter genuine as he guided tiny hands across canvases. Caleb wore faded jeans and a paint-splattered hoodie, his dark hair tousled, eyes warm like the coffee he later offered Gavin from a thermos. Their first conversation was simple, about nothing and everything. Gavin lied at first, saying he was just a guy volunteering on his day off, not the heir whose face had been on Forbes covers. Caleb didn't pry. He shared stories of growing up in a cramped apartment in East LA, working 2 jobs to support his mom after his dad left. There was no pretense, no agenda. For the first time, Gavin felt seen, not as the future CEO, but as a man with doubts and dreams he had buried deep. They exchanged numbers that day, and what started as casual texts turned into late-night calls where Gavin confessed fears he had never voiced to anyone. Weeks passed, and their secret meetings became the highlight of Gavin's rigid schedule. Caleb took him to hole-in-the-wall taco trucks and hiking trails in the hills where the city lights twinkled below. Gavin, in turn, showed Caleb quiet corners of museums after hours, using his connections discreetly. The differences in their worlds were glaring, yet they bonded over shared laughs and the way Caleb could calm Gavin's racing thoughts with a single touch on his shoulder. Love crept in quietly, like the morning fog rolling off the Pacific. Gavin realized he was gay not in a dramatic flash but in the steady realization that Caleb completed him in ways no woman or family approval ever could. But secrecy came with a price. Gavin's internal conflict grew with every lie he told his family about late nights at the office. He agonized over the prejudice he knew lurked in his father's old-school views, the whispers at country clubs about the Harrington name. Caleb, sensing the strain, never pushed. "I don't need fancy dinners or approval," he would say during their stolen weekends in a modest Airbnb. "I just need you." Yet Gavin saw the flicker of doubt in Caleb's eyes when they passed billboards of Harrington developments, reminders of the gulf between them. Still, their connection deepened. Gavin started questioning his path, volunteering more at the center, even sketching ideas for a foundation that blended his resources with Caleb's passion for community art. Back in the dining room, the silence broke like a dam. His mother, Victoria, whispered, "Gavin, darling, this isn't you. Think of the company, the shareholders." Richard slammed his fist on the table, wine glasses rattling. "I built this empire for you, not for some phase. Get this man out of my house." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, respecting the storm he had walked into at Gavin's side. Gavin's chest burned with a mix of fear and defiance. This was the moment he had dreaded. Yet standing there with Caleb, he felt more alive than ever. The night was just beginning, and the consequences would ripple far beyond these walls. As the family erupted into overlapping arguments, Gavin pulled Caleb closer, his mind flashing back to the day he first admitted his feelings. It was during a sunset walk along Venice Beach, waves crashing as Gavin stopped and said the words that changed everything. Caleb had smiled, pulling him into a hug that smelled of salt and paint. From that point, their bond grew stronger amid stolen kisses and whispered plans for a future free of hiding. But Gavin knew the road ahead would demand choices that tested every part of him. The mansion's opulence now felt like a cage, and he wondered if love could truly break its bars. The arguments escalated quickly, voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony that filled the mansion's grand hall. Richard Harrington stood, his 6-foot frame casting a long shadow across the Persian rug, pointing a finger at Caleb as if he were an intruder rather than the man who had brought light into his son's life. "This is a disgrace. Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation? The board will laugh us out of the room." Gavin's uncle, a minor partner in the family firm, nodded vigorously, muttering about scandals and stock dips. Emily, however, remained quiet, her eyes darting between her brother and the stranger who suddenly made sense of years of Gavin's distant behavior. Victoria dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin, her diamond earrings catching the light. "We can fix this, sweetheart. Therapy, a nice girl from the club. Anything but this." Her words stung deeper than the outright anger, laced with the kind of denial Gavin had feared most. Caleb shifted slightly beside him, his posture straight but his free hand clenching at his side. Gavin could feel the tension radiating from him, the quiet strength that had always grounded their relationship now facing its greatest test. He had warned Caleb about this night, but words couldn't capture the raw humiliation of being dissected like a failed business deal. Gavin's mind raced back to the months leading up to this dinner, the slow build of their love against a backdrop of his growing restlessness. After that first meeting at the art center, they had fallen into a rhythm that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Caleb worked as a freelance illustrator by day and a part-time mechanic at his uncle's garage by night, his hands rough from tools yet gentle when they traced patterns on Gavin's back during quiet evenings. Gavin, meanwhile, juggled conference calls and investor lunches, all while sneaking away to Caleb's tiny studio apartment where the smell of turpentine mixed with fresh coffee. One pivotal evening stood out. They had driven up the coast to Malibu, parking Gavin's discreet black SUV on a secluded overlook. The ocean stretched endless below them as Gavin finally opened up about the pressure that had shaped his life since childhood. "Dad expects me to marry into another powerful family, seal alliances like some medieval king," he confessed, voice cracking. Caleb listened without interruption, then shared his own scars, how coming out to his mother at 19 had nearly broken their small family until she chose acceptance over tradition. "Love isn't about fitting into boxes," Caleb said softly. That night, under the stars, Gavin kissed him with a certainty he had never known, their connection solidifying into something unbreakable. Yet doubts crept in for both. Gavin wrestled with guilt every time he saw Caleb's worn sneakers next to his Italian leather shoes. Caleb, proud and independent, sometimes withdrew when Gavin offered to cover bills or introduce him to opportunities. "I don't want your money," he would say firmly. "I want us to build something real." These moments of misunderstanding tested them, forcing honest talks that strengthened their bond. Gavin began to see his privilege not as a shield but as a barrier, and he started small changes, like donating anonymously to the community center and mentoring kids alongside Caleb. Friends noticed the shift too. Gavin's best friend from Yale, Marcus, a straight ally who worked in marketing, pulled him aside at a rooftop party one night. "You're different, lighter. Whoever he is, hold on." But secrecy weighed heavy. Gavin canceled family vacations twice to spend time with Caleb, fabricating excuses that left him exhausted. The internal crisis peaked when Richard announced plans to groom him for the CEO role at the annual shareholders meeting. Gavin realized he couldn't live two lives forever. The decision to come out crystallized during a weekend hike in the San Gabriel Mountains, where Caleb turned to him on a ridge and said, "Whatever you choose, I'm here. But don't choose fear." Now, in the mansion, the fallout unfolded with brutal precision. Richard demanded Caleb leave immediately, threatening to call security. Victoria pleaded for privacy to discuss options. Emily finally spoke up, her voice small but clear. "Dad, stop. This isn't about the company." Her words hung in the air, a crack in the family armor. Gavin felt a surge of gratitude mixed with sorrow. He had protected her from similar pressures growing up, and now she stood with him in her quiet way. Caleb squeezed his hand once more, a silent signal of support amid the storm. As the evening wore on, the group moved uneasily to the living room, where crystal decanters of scotch sat untouched. Gavin recounted pieces of their story, how Caleb's kindness had pulled him from the numbness of boardrooms and galas. But Richard cut him off, pacing like a caged lion. "This will ruin us. Think of your mother, your sister. The press will have a field day." The betrayal Gavin feared most wasn't outright rejection, but the way family loyalty twisted into control. He saw the fear in his father's eyes, not of him being gay, but of losing the empire's image. Caleb remained composed, answering questions about his background with quiet dignity. He spoke of his mother's struggles as a single parent, his own path through community college, the art that gave him purpose. Gavin watched with pride as Caleb held his own, but he also noticed the subtle glances from relatives, judgments masked as concern. The night stretched into hours of tense dialogue, revelations spilling like wine from an overturned glass. Gavin's choice to bring Caleb here wasn't impulsive. It was the culmination of months of soul-searching. He had sacrificed secrecy for truth, and now the consequences demanded he face them head-on. Outside, the California night air cooled the gardens, but inside the mansion, heat rose with every accusation. Gavin knew this was only the beginning. Misunderstandings loomed, and deeper conflicts waited in the days ahead. Yet holding Caleb's hand, he felt the first stirrings of freedom, a path toward the man he was meant to become. By midnight, the family had scattered into smaller groups, but the tension lingered like smoke from a dying fire. Gavin and Caleb retreated to the guest wing, a suite overlooking the pool where moonlight danced on the water. Caleb sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, rubbing his temples. "That was rougher than I imagined," he admitted, voice steady but eyes tired. Gavin knelt beside him, cupping his face. "You were incredible. I couldn't have done this without you." Their embrace that night was tender, filled with the quiet understanding that had carried them through months of hidden dates and whispered fears. The next morning brought no relief. Richard summoned Gavin to his home office, a wood-paneled room lined with photos of business triumphs. "This isn't just about you," he said, voice low. "The merger with Kensington Group hangs by a thread. One hint of this and they walk." Gavin stood tall, the boy who once craved approval now facing his father as an equal. "Then let them walk. I'm not hiding anymore." The conversation escalated into accusations of selfishness, Richard revealing old wounds from his own youth, how he had fought poverty to build their life. Gavin saw the man behind the tycoon, but it didn't soften the blow when his father hinted at cutting him from the will. Caleb waited outside, exploring the gardens where roses bloomed in perfect rows. He felt out of place among the staff who eyed him curiously, but he refused to shrink. Back in East LA, his friends had warned him about dating up, about the invisible lines that wealth drew. Yet Caleb had fallen for Gavin's vulnerability, the way he listened to stories of neighborhood struggles and genuinely wanted to help. Their first major misunderstanding had come early, when Gavin tried to pay Caleb's rent during a slow month at the garage. Caleb had refused, storming out until Gavin apologized with a handmade card and a promise to respect boundaries. That incident taught them both about balance, turning potential resentment into deeper trust. As days passed, the mansion became a pressure cooker. Victoria organized a family intervention disguised as brunch, inviting a discreet counselor who spoke in careful terms about lifestyle choices. Emily pulled Gavin aside in the library, confessing she had suspected for years and admired his courage. "Dad's scared because you're rewriting the script he wrote," she said. Her support became a lifeline, but it also highlighted fractures in the family dynamic. Friends from Gavin's circle began calling, some offering solidarity, others probing for gossip. Marcus flew in from New York, taking Caleb out for beers and declaring him good people. The conflict deepened when a distant cousin leaked hints to a tabloid contact, forcing Gavin to confront the societal prejudices he had long ignored. Headlines teased Harrington heir's secret life, and the board demanded a meeting. Gavin's identity crisis hit its peak during a sleepless night where he questioned if love was worth losing everything. Caleb held him through it, sharing his own journey of self-acceptance after high school bullying. "We grow through the fire," he whispered. Their bond strengthened in those vulnerable hours, romantic moments stolen in the garden where they walked hand in hand under the stars, talking about dreams of a shared apartment and community projects. Betrayal struck unexpectedly from within. Gavin's uncle, eager to position his own son for the CEO spot, confronted Caleb privately in the garage, offering money to disappear. Caleb refused, but the incident planted seeds of doubt. He wondered if Gavin's world would always try to buy or break them. Gavin, learning of it later, raged at his uncle, sacrificing a key project role in the company to stand firm. The choice marked a turning point, forcing him to prioritize integrity over inheritance. Through it all, the two men navigated public outings carefully at first, then boldly. A simple coffee run in Santa Monica became a statement, Caleb's arm around Gavin's shoulders drawing stares but also quiet nods from strangers. Gavin's growth showed in small ways. He started sketching plans for a non-profit art program funded partly by his trust, blending his resources with Caleb's vision. Misunderstandings still arose, like when Caleb felt overshadowed at a charity event, but open talks resolved them, building resilience. The mansion, once a symbol of security, now represented the old life Gavin was outgrowing. Family dinners resumed with icy politeness, but cracks appeared. Richard avoided eye contact, yet watched from afar as Gavin thrived in his new authenticity. Caleb's presence humanized the household in unexpected ways, his stories of real struggle prompting Victoria to quietly donate to local shelters. Yet the pressure mounted as the merger deadline loomed, testing whether love could withstand the external forces pulling them apart. Gavin faced sleepless nights weighing loyalty and self, but Caleb's unwavering support reminded him of the happiness they had found together. The journey was far from over, with higher stakes and deeper emotions waiting to unfold. Weeks blurred into a tense standoff, the mansion echoing with forced normalcy while underlying currents threatened to pull everything under. Gavin threw himself into work at the foundation he had quietly launched with Caleb's input, designing after-school programs that merged business acumen with community needs. Caleb balanced his garage shifts with more time at the estate, his artistic eye helping redesign a neglected wing into a creative space for staff kids. Their romantic moments became anchors, picnics by the pool where laughter drowned out doubts, or quiet drives along Pacific Coast Highway where the ocean washed away the day's battles. But betrayal festered. Gavin's uncle escalated, feeding false stories to board members about instability in the heir's personal life, claiming it risked millions. When Gavin confronted him in the study, documents in hand proving the leaks, the uncle sneered, "Family first, but bloodlines matter." The words cut deep, exposing the conditional love Gavin had always sensed. He sacrificed his vice president title that afternoon, stepping down to protect Caleb from further attacks. The decision sent shockwaves through the company, forcing Richard to intervene publicly for the first time in support, albeit grudgingly. Caleb faced his own internal war. Insecurities about class bubbled up during a tense lunch with Victoria, who subtly questioned his long-term plans. He retreated to his old apartment for a night, leaving Gavin to pace the empty suite. Misunderstandings peaked when Gavin assumed Caleb wanted space permanently, nearly pushing him away with overcompensating gifts. Caleb returned, hurt but honest. "I love you, not your last name." Their reconciliation under the stars, hands clasped on the balcony, solidified their commitment, turning pain into growth. Society's gaze intensified as a local magazine ran a profile on the unlikely pair, sparking online debates that Gavin read late into the night. Some praised their courage, others echoed the family's prejudices. Gavin's crisis of identity evolved from fear to empowerment. He began speaking at LGBT youth events, his voice steady as he shared anonymized pieces of his journey. Caleb joined him once, their joint appearance a quiet triumph that drew standing ovations. Family dynamics shifted subtly. Emily confided in Caleb about her own struggles with expectations, forging an unlikely friendship that softened the household. Richard, watching from the sidelines, started asking tentative questions over scotch, revealing his own regrets about a brother who had lived authentically but paid a price. The thawing was slow, laced with awkward silences, but it planted seeds of acceptance. Yet external pressures mounted when the Kensington merger partner discovered the rumors and demanded reassurances. Gavin chose transparency, scheduling a meeting where he introduced Caleb openly, sacrificing potential billions for honesty. Through the chaos, their love deepened in everyday ways. Caleb taught Gavin to change oil on an old truck, hands greasy and laughter echoing in the garage. Gavin surprised Caleb with a studio setup in the mansion's east wing, complete with supplies for his illustrations. These acts of understanding bridged their worlds, proving that growth came from mutual respect. Misunderstandings arose again when a jealous ex-colleague of Gavin's spread lies about Caleb's motives, leading to a heated argument resolved only by raw vulnerability. The climax built as Richard announced a family vote on Gavin's role in the company. The night before, Gavin and Caleb sat on the beach, waves lapping at their feet. "Whatever happens, we have each other," Caleb said, pulling him close. Gavin nodded, the weight of sacrifice lifting as he embraced the man who had redefined his legacy. The mansion, once a prison of pretense, now witnessed their quiet strength. Conflicts tested every boundary, but each confrontation forged them stronger, paving the way for the awakening that would redefine not just their futures but the family's too. The family vote loomed like a storm cloud, turning the mansion into a hive of whispered alliances and avoided glances. Gavin spent the day in quiet preparation, reviewing financial reports that no longer defined his worth. Caleb stayed by his side, offering steady presence without pressure, their shared meals in the kitchen a rebellion against formal dining rooms. That afternoon, they escaped to the park where their second scene of happiness had unfolded months ago, sitting on the same bench under oak trees. "No matter the outcome, this is our home now," Gavin said, kissing Caleb's temple. The moment reminded them of why they fought, love's quiet power against legacy's roar. Richard called the meeting in the boardroom annex, faces tense around the polished table. Votes split along predictable lines, Uncle pushing for removal, Emily and a surprising ally in Victoria voting to retain Gavin with conditions. The tie fell to Richard, who paused long, eyes meeting Gavin's. "You've changed the game, son, but family means adapting." He voted yes, with caveats that Gavin step into a new role overseeing social initiatives. The decision stunned everyone, a reluctant acknowledgement of growth over control. Yet the uncle's betrayal lingered, prompting Gavin to distance himself from certain dealings, a sacrifice that cost short-term profits but gained long-term integrity. Caleb's world expanded too. Invited to contribute designs for the foundation's logo, he poured his heart into sketches that captured resilience and connection. Misunderstandings surfaced when media hounded him for interviews, making him feel exposed. Gavin shielded him fiercely, learning to set boundaries that protected their privacy. Their relationship matured through these trials, romantic evenings evolving into plans for a modest house away from the mansion, symbolizing independence. Internal awakenings ripened. Gavin confronted his lifelong fear of disappointing his father in a private talk that lasted hours, tears and truths exchanged. Richard admitted his own rigid upbringing, opening a door neither expected. Caleb, meanwhile, reconciled with his past by visiting his mother with Gavin, introducing him as family. The warmth there contrasted the mansion's formality, reinforcing Caleb's resilience. Societal pressures eased as public support grew, invitations to speak at events pouring in. Gavin and Caleb accepted one together, their joint story inspiring young men facing similar crossroads. Betrayals from outsiders faded against the solid foundation they had built. Yet one final test came when a distant relative challenged the will, claiming Gavin's lifestyle invalidated his share. Gavin fought legally but ultimately sacrificed a portion to settle peacefully, choosing peace over prolonged war. Through it all, happiness bloomed in small victories. Weekend hikes, shared cooking disasters, and late talks about dreams filled their days. Gavin's growth shone in his advocacy work, while Caleb's confidence soared in his art exhibitions featuring pieces inspired by their journey. The mansion, once chaotic, now hosted gatherings where families slowly integrated Caleb, laughter replacing silence. Their love had weathered storms, emerging refined and unbreakable. Months later, the mansion gardens bloomed under spring sun as the family gathered for a low-key barbecue, a far cry from the formal dinners of old. Gavin flipped burgers beside Caleb, their easy banter drawing smiles from Emily and even a gruff nod from Richard. Victoria arranged flowers with Caleb's input, the once frosty air now warm with tentative bonds. The journey had reshaped everyone, conflicts yielding to understanding, sacrifices paving roads to authenticity. Gavin reflected on the boy who once hid, now standing openly with the man who taught him courage. Caleb's influence rippled outward, his community programs thriving with Harrington backing. Their shared life in a new home nearby balanced independence with family ties. Romantic walks in the park reminding them of beginnings. Misunderstandings had become lessons, betrayals catalysts for stronger alliances. Gavin's awakening complete, he mentored others, his story a beacon for those navigating love against odds. As sunset painted the sky, Gavin pulled Caleb aside, whispering promises of forever amid laughter from the group. The mansion no longer loomed as a cage but stood as a witness to transformation. Their love had triumphed not by erasing differences but by embracing them fully. True or false? True love between two men can overcome deep-rooted family prejudice and societal expectations?